So welcome. We are hopefully all here for the third rail talking about Israel in our communities. So that can be interpreted several different ways, but what we will be talking about is the country of Israel. And my name is Sheila Malcolm. I will be gatekeeping and helping with the timing for this event so that you have plenty of time to use the new restrooms and schmooze when you're done.
The restrooms are suitable for breakout meetings.
Sign up. You don't have to tell women that.
I noticed that they have been already. They're very accommodating. And I'm here to welcome Rabbi Tzemah Yoreh and almost Rabbi Natan Fuchs.
That's eternal almost.
That's just my opinion. I looked up third rail in anticipation, and William Safire of the New York Times says, "We have here one of the most vivid political metaphors coined in the U.S. in the past generation. As every subway strap hanger knows, the word picture is rooted in the system invented in the 1880s, providing electric current to a railroad train and running parallel to its two rails. Passengers are wise to give it a wide berth." How and when did this fear of this technological conveyor of power become transformed into the quintessence of political caution? And, I would add, William Safire would add, how did the how did the promised land become the source of such controversy and surus among Jews? And here to answer those questions.
No pressure.
90 minutes or less.
And solve everything that has not been solved to this point, I will now hand over.
We're going to introduce ourselves. Let me tell you a little bit about how we're going to structure this. It's going to be, after the introductions, we have 4 subtopics that we want to talk about. We will have a conversation between me and Natan, and then we will have people respond. So I'll start right now with the introduction. Natan then will introduce himself, and then we'll introduce the topics. So I'm Tzemah. I lived most of my life in Israel. Still most of my life. It won't be most of my life in another 7-8 years, but still about 60%. I consider myself an Israeli expat because I've made my life over here. And so I came to this dialogue on Israel later, and I was the first thing was I was really, really taken aback by the toxicity of how people were talking about Israel. I didn't know why then. Now I've had a long time to think about the whys, and I can offer some reasons and some solutions. But then I was just taken aback. And to be frank, I'm still quite reluctant to engage people on Israel. So this is like a little nerve-wracking for me and frightening, the size of the audience that are now engaging on Israel. So hopefully you'll treat me nicely. The eggs and the tomatoes, I think, are there.
They've been put away.
I grew up, I'm a transplant to Humanist Judaism. I grew up in quite a religious background, as did Natan, and we're going to talk about that. For grade school and then for high school, I went to religious institutions in Israel, Dati Leumi, National Religious. The high school that I went to was especially known as a settler yeshiva. My parents were not Orthodox, but I would say what's called traditional egalitarian. So they, they're professors of rabbinic literature, and so they wanted me to get a good rabbinic education. They were willing to gamble that I'd have a certain value system that wasn't reflected in those institutions. And then I went to, after that, I made my way to Humanistic Judaism gradually through largely being very interested in biblical criticism and eventually getting my doctorate at Hebrew University. But that was like largely, it was like the contrast between yeshiva and the academy. You'll discover parts of my life as we have this conversation. And I don't want to be too lengthy about it. But I really I want to find a way forward about how American Jews, and I consider myself an American Jew now, how we talk about Israel and still don't hate each other and want to kill each other. And it's really it's something vitally important because it's just a country that we have strong emotions about and we need to talk about it. Yeah.
Thank you,
What are you
Tzemah.
doing now?
Oh, what am I doing now? Oh, okay. I'm the rabbi of City Congregation in New York City. I've been in that position for a little less than a year. I still haven't talked about Israel at City Congregation. We'll see after the reception here whether it's something that I want to do. Here you go.
Okay, so as Tzemah said, we have a lot in common in our personal histories. Although my parents were more than traditional, my parents were what Tzemah referred to as National Orthodox, which in years past, for Americans, we translated as Modern Orthodox. Not so anymore, because they've become something very different, and in a different way than what Tzemah used the word, very toxic to the conversation. We'll get more into that. I am also a product of a yeshiva I was originally supposed to become an Orthodox rabbi. I was groomed by my parents to be an Orthodox rabbi. Didn't quite work out that way. I was in two yeshivas, one in Israel and one in the United States in Chicago. In fact, the head of the yeshiva in my time was a fairly famous Orthodox rabbi. His name was Aaron Soloveitchik, the brother of the Rabbi Soloveitchik you probably would think of, not himself. But he too was very liberal, which a lot of Orthodox Jews at that time were. He was very proud of having supported Martin Luther King. And in fact, my departure from that world was when I told Rabbi Soloveitchik that I won't be there for the summer because I'm going down south to help register people to vote. And he said, you know what you're doing is very important. But if you stay and study Torah, you'd be doing something more important. And I thought about it and I said, I don't think so. And that was basically my departure from that world. Back to our topic of Israel. The topic, as Tzemah said, is toxic because in the American Jewish community at large, it's very difficult to talk about Israel. The people have very definite, very strong opinions. I know of at least one rabbi in the Detroit area that got fired for saying the wrong thing for being a little too critical of the Israeli Prime Minister, current Israeli Prime Minister. And Hopefully that's not true of our movement. I think it's a difficult topic. The topic is difficult, and I see a lot of the strong differences of opinion. A lot of them are generational, between, for one thing, older generation that literally remember the Holocaust, and it makes them, in a way fearful, in a way at least subconsciously fearful. Maybe we need that possibility of a place to escape to if anything happens here, And the younger generation for whom the Holocaust is the same as the Spanish expulsion was for me, It's history, it's Jewish history. And so they come to their opinions, hopefully in more thinking ways rather than emotional ways. And okay, so let's start what we have to say about where we are. And I'd like to say, I like most of it, to have more of an audience participation.
Absolutely. So we're gonna there are 4 topics that we're hoping to discuss. One is Israel as an idea rather than a place, and we're gonna have a conversation about that. I think that because Israel is an idea and not a place for people, that contributes to the toxicity of the dialogue around it. The other, we're going to talk about Israel and social media. Some of the most horrible conversations I've witnessed on Israel have been on Facebook. And we're going to talk about the importance, the third subtopic will be the importance of valorizing other narratives around Israel, not just your own. Like how do we promote that kind of civility? And then the fourth topic is to try to complicate matters and to show how things are not black and white. Just like there are left-wing evangelical Christians in the United States, there are also left-wing Orthodox Jews in Israel. Both phenomena exist and are not heard about. So just to give us a more nuanced picture of things, and those I think will be our four topics. So we're going to start with, and after each topic, we'll invite questions, and hopefully we'll keep time, and so we can discuss everything we need to discuss. But if we get caught up in something really interesting, we're not gonna stop. This is what we want to do. We want to have a discussion. We want to hear people. So let's start with Israel as an idea. So one of the things I've just noticed, there's a push these days to have a birthright and a lot of programs to bring American Jews to Israel to experience that. And I was wondering, for some it's been an eye-opening, great experience, but do visits of a week or two or even a little longer, do they really promote a nuanced understanding of Israel that would help with dialogue? What do you think, Natan?
It's very interesting because this week I heard a discussion about the birthright program on NPR. Some of you may have heard of it as well, where a young man who participated in the birthright program was interviewed, and he was very upset about what the program was used for. The idea originally was, as you said, to introduce young Jewish people to Israel, to give them a favorable impression. And first of all, he wanted to know a little bit more. This was a young man who knew a little bit about the problems, the Palestinian issue, and he wanted to hear a little bit more about that. And that was kind of the way he put it, was hidden and was deliberately avoided. This had been, well, the Israeli government is promoting that. The problem to me is that the powers that be in the Jewish establishment, in the American Jewish establishment, are very much participating in that. Now, you know, historically, the Jewish community had been very much cooperating with any Israeli government. So when every Israeli government, the period when every Israeli government was a labor government, the Jewish establishment in the United States, the official Jewish establishment, supported labor. And labor Zionism was very strong in the United States. After, well, in the late 1970s and onward, that as, you know, in 1977, the Likud for the first time took the government. And after that, and even more so, as labor had been losing power more and more in Israel. I don't know if most of you know it, in the last elections, they got 6 mandates. 6, you know. So that's quite a drop from a party that in many ways created the state of Israel and had been for a long time the ruling parties, the party with the strongest, you know, with no one party ever had a majority in Israeli elections, but it was the largest party. Yeah. So the Jewish establishment had become very pro-Israeli government, very pro-Netanyahu government lately. And by the way, when we look at at all the Likud government, I'm assuming that when I mention Israeli parties by name, most of you are familiar. Most of you know what I'm talking about. Okay, so when we look into the Likud governments in Israel, there's a huge difference between Begin's Likud government and Netanyahu's Likud government. And I'm just reading, I brought with me a couple of articles from Haaretz, which is an Israeli newspaper one of the two that I read pretty much daily. And most of the soldiers in the Israeli army today, you know, are not in. I remember at a time when I was saying most Israelis don't know any Israel without an occupation. You know, now I have to go even farther. Most of the young Israelis, most of the people who are now serving in the army, actually all of them, are not familiar with an Israel in which Netanyahu is not prime minister. And that says a lot.
I wanted to rewind a little talk about how Americans relate to that, and so we see birthright, and there's been, from what I know, a lot of pushback against birthright, like you mentioned, with the NPR interview, and I know personally other people as well, and then so there have been like alternative birthright, that come from a more left-wing perspective, and also that kind of dialogue has pushed birthright to actually address it to some extent at least, and to create more programming within birthright to facilitate a more nuanced understanding of what's happening in Israel, and so I think that that's good. I want to return back to the original, headline of our discussion, and that was, Israel as an idea. Like even if people come for a week or two to Israel for a few weeks, for a month, Are they getting? Does Israel cease being an idea and start becoming a real place? When they come back, are they more prepared? To have a more nuanced discussion, a more civil discussion about Israel. So I truly don't know. And the number of American Jews that have gone on birthright is very high at this point. Have I noticed a less toxic dialogue? No, I have not noticed. I've noticed a more toxic dialogue. So I don't know if how much that has actually helped. I would hope that it has, but I don't know if it has. And so, then how is just the name birthright? It's kind of like supporting a particular narrative. It's supporting this is our, we as American Jews, we can any day just take off on a plane and go to Israel, and that's our birthright, and it's our right to do, and because it's enshrined in Israeli law, the right of return. The right, that any Jew can make aliyah to Israel and become a citizen. So I'm just wondering, and this is the point there where I want to open it up to discussion. To if you think that this has been effective, is there a more effective way to promote this? So please, we'll take questions now. Yes, Dan.
So it's, as may be dangerous, this is more a comment than a question, but that's how these things go. In terms of just the idea of Israel, which I like that as a way to start out, something I read that just really struck me as absolutely right was when Israel was founded, what was the idea of Israel? It was the home for the refugees of Europe. It was the response to the Holocaust. It was what you said, that there has to always be a place for Jews to go. But the way, just with cultural changes, there's this idea that the idea of Israel it's now an example of colonialism, because that's what we think about. Where are Europeans essentially pushing indigenous groups off land, taking resources? And so it's like, even regardless of whether Israel has changed, the narratives in which we look at the world, and that gets, is it ancient history or is it modern history or just what's changed? That I think, especially for younger people, that is such a fundamental way of looking at the world. And so where does Israel fit in that context? In a very obvious way. It's Europeans, even though it's not exclusively, that's how we think of it. It's Europeans dispossessing indigenous people of their land. It fits that narrative, and that becomes a natural way to think about it.
Yeah. So I'll give you a chance in a second, Natan. So yeah, I definitely, having been an academic and been in the academy for years, I've noticed the leftward trends in the academy, and definitely colonialism and post-colonialism is something that is being taught a lot to young people, and so that is one of the prisms, one of the narratives that they will see, and then they, You'll not hear me advocate a particular position over here. I'm talking about promoting civil dialogue. So you hear that a lot in the academy. You also hear, that place as Israel as a refuge is also a competing, still very strong narrative. How do we grant, is there a validity to the colonialist, post-colonialist narrative? There is. It has coherence. It helps explain things. It empowers people. But how do we make it work with other narratives? How do we respect earlier narratives that also have a power and a validity? So yes.
To answer your question, I think you have to, how do we make it work? I think I've done dialogue groups with Palestinians and Jewish liberals, academics, for many years, and at some point, a long time ago, we realized that there were two narratives, and that's what it was. There were two different stories. The question is, from here on, where do we go? And the answer back then was a two-state solution. The two-state solution concept was accepted by both sides. For many of us today, and that's still a concept that resolves all these questions. Just to tell you, in terms of the whole birthright issue, in Michigan there's a very active group called If Not Now, which of course supports the position of these young people who are questioning why are we not allowed to learn about Jewish history in terms of Palestinians? Why have we been denied, lied to all these years in our religious institutions where we were raised, and now we're finding out about this Palestinian issue, and we're still not allowed to go visit. And we're being used for recruitment to future Aliyah, which leads me to one question about Aliyah at some point, if you could address it. So I have close contact with the French Jewish community, and of course Israel is constantly trying to recruit these Jews from Europe to make Aliyah, to leave. So every time there's an incident there, they come in with a lot of money and give money to these young people to go make Aliyah, and some of them stay in Israel, some of them come back. And at the same time, the very next day, Sharansky, for example, is the head of a Jewish agency who helps to recruit, not anymore, who helps to recruit for Aliyah, these young Jews. He comes to Europe and he says, we're witnessing the end of European Jewry, this hypocrisy, when he's the one that's been helping it through money. And my cousin told me they call it Zionist propaganda. The Zionists, and my cousin in Europe are Zionists, they say the Zionists come in from Israel and they buy off these young people to make Aliyah. So this birthright issue is also relating to the youth and trying to recruit all the Jews from the world to come to Israel.
Thank you.
That's powerful, right.
So I think we're talking about recruiting for Aliyah.
Fact or fiction?
Okay. So I want to take a step back and just like I'm very hesitant to use binaries of two sides, us and them, Israelis, Palestinians, right and left. There is like a vast continuum, and there's I'm sure that in this room I would find for each person has their own position on this. And so, definitely, I know because I've been part of multiple positions myself. I haven't had two positions on this topic at all. So I want to, just promote that, because an us and them, black and white binary creates conflict. And when we realize that we have ideas on a continuum, on a spectrum, and that it draws us closer together. We don't disagree about everything. There are certain things we agree on. There are certain things that we're lukewarm on. It's just like the temperature of water has a continuum. So do our opinions on Israel. Does the Israeli government recruit for Aliyah? Yes, it does. And we know that, and we're not. Is that a problem? You can see it as competing ideas, right? I'm purposely not going to be advocating any specific idea because I want to remain neutral. But there's a way. If that is something that's problematic for you, that the Israeli government is going to Jewish communities around the world and promoting Aliyah, then you can combat it with, well, why is it important to stay here and to have a vibrant Jewry here? And you can have competing ideas, and then the idea with more vibrancy, the idea with more cohesiveness. So that's the idea that hopefully will gain more traction.
When I returned to Israel from after having been educated here, I'm also an Israeli native, and I returned to Israel after the 6-Day War. So, and at the time, I came from being active in the left in the United States to being active in the left in Israel. And at the time, our motto was, we've been taught that, kind of to answer what part of what Renee was asking, we've been taught that there's a right and wrong here. Now, the Palestinians obviously say, we have been dispossessed, we are right, you are interlopers and you're wrong. The Israeli position was, well, this is our historical homeland, and we have returned. So we are right. And the Israeli left position at the time, by the way, when I'm talking about left and right in Israeli terms, I'm not talking about the classical terminology of left and right. I'm strictly talking about the Jewish-Palestinian issue in the Middle East, in Israel-Palestine. So maybe our motto had been, no, it's not a left, it's not a right and wrong, it's a right and right. And we both have rights. We both have historical rights, and they clash. And they have clashed, and we need to come to a point that the solution to the problem is somehow to get to a point where both of us feel that we have our right fulfilled. So, how do you do that? There are three versions of the solution. If you're living in the Middle East, in Israel and Palestine, or Palestine, there are three ways. One way is what was mentioned, a two-state solution. So we somehow divide it, and there are different ways that was told, and that has been tried, as you know. It had been tried during the British Mandate. There was a vote on it for 2 states. Didn't work out that time. And then it came back as an idea after the Six-Day War of 1967. But somehow divide the land so that we both have our rights fulfilled. That's this 2-state solution. Unfortunately, in both sides, I think you have a slight majority that doesn't agree with that. At least that's how it is today, I believe. On the Jewish side, and both of them are agreed on one thing. If not a 2-state solution, then a 1-state solution. Of course, what that state looks like is quite different, because the Palestinian 1-state solution is a Palestinian Arab state, and the Israeli 1-state solution is a Jewish state in which, and then it's a problem. For the Israelis who advocate it, it's a problem, because what do you do with the couple of million Palestinians that live here? If it's 1 state, are they citizens? Are they equal citizens? Can they vote? And if you want a Jewish state, you can't have that, because then it would not be a Jewish state. Similar problem you have with a Palestinian 1-state solution as of today. And we're not talking about going back in history and stopping the initial flow of Jewish Jewish refugees, all the people that initially founded Israel. So again, we're coming back to what is the solution? And right now, I am feeling what a lot of, going back to, I believe, the 1970s already, as long ago as the late 70s, where Meir Ben-Benishti had already said, you know what? We started settling the West Bank. That idea is gone. we ourselves have put an end to it. We can't do it, you know. Is that true? Because there are still people that are saying that the only possible solution is somehow a one-state solution that would involve, at this stage, removing about, I believe it's about 200,000, more than that, Jewish settlers from the West Bank. How many?
It's getting close to 500,000 already.
Really? That shows how behind time I am. So,
Every day.
yeah, absolutely every day. First of all, I'd like to hear from people here. I'm glad you raised your hand. What do you see as a possible solution to it that would actually, I mean, if you were going to impose a solution from the United States, a workable solution, not a Trump $1 million solution, what would you do?
Yeah. This is going to be complicated to answer, but we'll give an opportunity, I'll say, for 2 or 3 possible solutions.
Sivan wanted to.
Sivan?
Hi. Other people with solutions, but what I wanted to refer to is what you were asking about the gap between idea and reality. I'm going back to your initial question. And I'm looking at the Declaration of Independence in Israel. And the Declaration of Independence states that the country will be based on freedom, justice, and peace as envisioned by the prophets of Israel. It will ensure complete equality of social and political rights to all its inhabitants, irrespective of religion, race, or sex. It will guarantee freedom of religion, conscience, language, education, and culture. It will safeguard the holy places of all religions, and it will be faithful to the principles of the Charter of the United Nations. Now, when we think of a one country, the situation is that that could be the foundation of a Jewish country. It could also be the foundation of a country of all its citizens, which is the third option you didn't get to. You gave 3 numbers, you told 2, and I'm sure you were about to talk about the third one as well. That is also something which is talked about in Israel. I do think that part of what we need to realize that any country, including the United States, will always have a gap between the idea and the reality. And one of the things that we, I think, should engage ourselves in is understand the ideas that were the foundations of our countries. And understand that the fact that the realities don't express the whole idea or the whole vision as it was envisioned in the beginning doesn't mean that with that we shy away from the discussion or we divorce the country. I don't think we can do that. If we are leaders, as I think we are, humanistic leaders, we have to understand that we stand behind the vision and the fact that in the reality there are things that need to be changed, like slavery or egalitarian justice or et cetera, it takes time. It takes time and it takes people like us. One thing I don't think we can let us continue to do is not have an opinion. And in order to have an opinion, like we study humanism in our congregations, like we study justice, just like we study American law, whatever it is that we think is important for us to understand, we should engage ourselves in studying Israel. Adam is going to be leading a trip to Israel now, which is not birthright, and it is not run by any government. It is run by this organization. And therefore, this is a wonderful chance to try and see this, how does this relate? The visions of Israelis, many of them Arabs, some of them are Palestinians. What's the difference between Palestinians, Arabs, Druze, Cherkess? Who are all these people? This is something that I hope that at least some of you will have the opportunity to come to Israel and have these discussions. And we'll try to help as much as we can for you to meet this diverse reality in Israel. But don't shy away from having an opinion.
Okay, let's try for.
Do you want to respond first?
Sure. Thank you, Sivan. I would have wished that you had a seat right beside us over here. Yes, you too often are, on the seat. I appreciate that. So thank you. I endorse what you said, and I'm going to be on that trip as well. So I hope people come. It's a trip that is designed for humanist Jews, and you'll meet very thoughtful people, and I encourage people to come. Yes. So we're going to do two more people.
I just want to say that I hear 4 possible solutions.
4 possible. Okay.
Well, no, the 2-state solution, a Jewish state, a Palestinian state, and some sort of cosmopolitan state.
Okay.
Which I think is what you were getting at. The 2-state solution seems practically speaking, an impossibility now, given how divided up the West Bank is and how discontinuous all the Palestinian inhabited areas are. It doesn't seem possible that there could be an effective administration or coherent culture and all of those sorts of things.
Yeah, I deliberately didn't mention what Sivan brought up, the idea of a state of all its citizens, because of the fact that works if you don't have the West Bank. It doesn't work with the West Bank, because then, again, you're in a one-state solution, and which one? So people that talk about a state of all its citizens are talking about Jews and Arabs who are citizens of Israel, who are approximately 20% of the population. And we still have to solve the problem of territories that are under occupation. By the way, the Hebrew word kibush, occupation, is an unholy word. You're not supposed to use it under this government. But the fact is that there are a couple of million people who are living under occupation, and their rights are being trampled on, and that's a fact. So.
Okay, we'll do. We do want to discuss other things. I'll give a chance for one more. Not that I'm trying to shut anyone up here. Dan.
Thanks. I want to pick up a little bit on what Sivan was talking about, but also, Natan, how you were talking about I think quoting Amos-Oz, the idea of the conflict between right and right. But I think in terms of the relationship of American Jews to Israel, part of the issue is a sense that the Israeli Jewish population has actually gone wrong. And not speaking about the Palestinians, that they also have, but that it's not actually a conflict between right and right anymore. It may be a conflict between wrong and wrong. And that's not in terms of the existence of Israel, that's in terms, though, of the current realities. And so I think that for me, what I'm struggling with is it seems impossible to me, but I'd like to know what you think, that the American Jewish community can continue to be engaged with Israel in a productive way unless it takes a voice, right? Meaning that we've been told from the founding of Israel that we don't have a voice in it, that if you don't make aliyah, then you shouldn't express your opinions about these existential questions. And I think that that's my sense of where we are, is that is no longer possible if we want to continue to have a relationship, because it seems, from the recent election results, that because if you take only the Jewish population of Israel, then there's an extreme shift to the right. it looks different because we have the Arabs too, and then it looks kind of balanced. But the Jewish population is extremely to the right, and it feels like the only way to continue to have a relationship with people who you feel have gone so wrong is to at least be able to engage with them. And so I'd love to hear you talk about sort of that old story that we shouldn't have a say.
So I don't believe that. It's very interesting. I served in the army, so did Natan. But often when that seems to be like the right to have a voice, right? That you've served in the military, therefore you have a voice. I don't think so. You have a voice because you're a human being, and you have a right to an opinion. Right? It's not, and that should be enough. And you can have an opinion, whether your opinion, counts, in the eyes of someone else, that's their choice. But you have the right, the essential right to voice what you think, and that should never be denied. And that relationship that America is Israel's purse string is a toxic one. It's not a good one. It's it's a relationship that Israelis I know are very uncomfortable with. It's not just because Americans donate money to Israel. That's not a good relationship. I don't think that there is a good relationship right now. It's a relationship just like between human beings that needs to shape up. It's not a, yeah.
Yeah, okay. I sat with another Israeli fan, a member of a couple who are Israelis, who are members of the Birmingham Temple, and that was the Monday after the elections, the Israeli elections. And we were sitting and looking at the numbers and looking at the results and trying to figure out, you don't need to be much of a mathematician to know what looking at the results of all the parties, what the next government is going to be, who is going to be part of it, and that couple, married couple who are now living here, but who are also Israelis, roughly my generation. And we looked at each other, the three of us, and then the man says to me, you know what? It's not my country anymore. And he's been living in Israel much longer than me, because he came here much more recently than I did. And I understood what he said. I don't think that I agree with him. I'm Israeli. I feel I'm an Israeli American. And I feel in many ways very tied to Israel. And it's both to the country of Israel and to the idea of Israel. I teach history. And I've taught a course on the history of Zionism. And I don't define myself as a Zionist at this stage. I'm not sure. I more define myself as a post-Zionist, because Zionism in a way has fulfilled its what it wanted. There is a Jewish state. Jews have a right in Israel. Jews have a state of their own. And where do we go from here? And that's where I do understand what he said. I'm looking at where Israel is going, and to me it is scary. It's scary both from how this Israeli society is looking to me right now, but it's also scary as an existential issue. What will Israel look like? Will Israel survive that way? If you think that, and I saw Sivan, if you think that Israel is an apartheid state, well, what happened to the original apartheid state? You know.
Okay, I want to continue, Sivan, but I'm sorry. That we're already. We have 4 subtopics that we wanted to discuss. So let's move on to social media and how Israel is discussed in forums like Facebook. So, as I was saying before, some of the most toxic conversations occur on Facebook that I've seen about Israel occur on Facebook, and part of it, I think, is this is something that people know about social media in general. There's an anonymity granted by social media that allows people to say things that they would never say if they were face to face with someone. And that's an interesting anonymity because you have the name, especially, if you're friends with that person, you should know them, But as friends go on Facebook, it's I have friends, I'm friends with people on Facebook that I've met once or twice, and some that I have never met, it just is there a way to improve it? I truly don't know. I've been, as many people in my generation, I've been on Facebook for a very long time already. I've had one productive conversation on Facebook. That's it, one. I might consider myself lucky, And I convinced somebody that that the Muslim ban was ill-considered. That was the one time that I managed to do anything productive on Facebook. But I've had plenty of very, very toxic discussions on Facebook where I've tried to maintain a civility. But I just noticed in myself this pull towards saying things that I would never say to that person face to face. I noticed that I felt this freedom, that I would never use. And it's just interesting. And I'm wondering whether, there's actually anything to do about it. Is there a productive way to have a conversation on social media, on Twitter? I consciously, where people suggest having a discussion of this type, a serious discussion with nuanced ideas, I say, not on WhatsApp, not on Facebook, not on Twitter. I can have this conversation with you by phone or by face to face. But I don't know. There might be a way to have a productive conversation.
Why don't you tell us about the one good one?
No, I want to give Natan an opportunity to talk to you.
Basically, I don't have much to add to what Tzemah said. I don't have much, I'm not very active on Facebook. I am actually more active on WhatsApp, which is universal in Israel, much more than Facebook. And, but that's on social media, I'm usually active with my family and with close friends. And I don't worry about what I say to them or what they say to me. Although, interestingly enough, I managed to have a debate on WhatsApp with a close friend of mine in Israel, in Tel Aviv, about the American, the American election and the American government. So, which doesn't have anything to do with what we are discussing here. So, anyway, I want to pass it on.
Okay, I mean, has anybody had an experience that would point towards, Facebook or such as a positive place for discussion? I invite, because I want to hear a contrasting opinion here. Related to Israel specifically, yes.
Well, this is not related to Israel. However, very briefly, there are Facebook groups where there are people who monitor them. And trolling is not allowed. It's just blocked right out. and you can have a good conversation. One thing about Israel, though, I went to a meeting in face-to-face, but I think they use social media as well. There's an organization of parents who've lost children who are Palestinian and who are Israeli, and they have an organization, they meet in Israel and in Palestine regularly and talk to each other. Their children have killed each other's children, and they are close, and I went to hear them, and if they can talk to each other, anybody can talk to each other.
Yeah, I mean, face-to-face discussions.
And they're meeting face-to-face, but there's also an organization in the U.S. called livingroomconversations.org, and it's not to talk about Israel, it's to talk about Trump. And you have people who are Trump supporters and people who are liberals meeting together in living rooms, either online, mostly online, because in San Francisco you can't find Trump supporters. So you have to do it online. We've done a couple of them, and people are civil to each other, and you hear why people have the opinions they have, even though ordinarily it would make you crazy to even imagine anyone with those opinions. Yeah. And you actually, they learn from us, we learn from them, and it's been terrific.
Isn't it monitored? Doesn't everybody set up monitor it?
They get you started and then they leave. But they have ground rules, and you have to start with ground rules. And you have to basically respect each other. Yeah,
I mean, it's great that such discussions exist in Facebook in groups with moderators. I've had the discussions have turned toxic. It's not, yeah, I mean, a little less toxic if it's without a moderator, but still, you know, yes.
There's another group that's been around for quite a while. It has 62,000 followers. Jews and Arabs refuse to be enemies. It's been on Facebook.
Yeah.
Wow. I'm familiar.
I haven't seen that one.
I mean, I wanted to address the question of how, like, I had the one productive conversation on Facebook that I've had, and I just, you know, I kind of try to treat it as a face-to-face conversation, meaning, like, I deliberately tried to. It was very hard because I felt strongly about certain things he was saying. He also, you know, this was a Jewish military vet, and of the American military, and I just, like, kind of. You know, what I did was establish a shared reality. Yes, I also served in the military. Yes, I've also lost friends and you know, and experienced terror. And I also you know, I also read Arabic. You know, I also, like, have you know, I've also tried to understand. You know, and you know, and I, you know, mostly, like, you know, using rational and humanist principles of. You know, how do we you know, grant dignity to his position? And I think I managed. I don't know, because I've never had an encounter with this person again. But he was, like, by the time we finished a 3-day dialogue on Facebook, he was reconsidering his position, and you know, I'm happy with that. But it would have been much easier to have had that conversation face to face or even on the phone. You know, it just was, because I was so always like, ugh, like, so I can't believe you're saying these things all the time, and, like, you know, and it's very easy to, like, type it in and press enter, and you know, and, like, you know, restraining your hands, and that was really a very, I can say that, and I'm like a, you know, I've done martial arts for 20 years. I'm in control of myself, and it was still very hard for me. You know, but yes.
Just curious, no. Did you exchange names? Did he know you?
Yeah. He knew. It was through a mutual friend on Facebook. That's how it got started. Yeah.
Maybe that helped.
Yeah. So I don't know. Has anybody had an experience on like a positive experience around Israel on Facebook that they would like to share? Oh, okay. I'm sorry. You know that's the case.
Dissel, whether you watch Dissel or not, and if you like it on Facebook.
The question may be, who has had online dialogue?
Who's had any online dialogue about Israel on Facebook?
So, no
okay.
misread the audience.
Yeah, I just want to make an observation about how you found that as your conversation went on, how you found when your conversation went on that it got worse and worse. or you found your
No, I at every stage in the conversation, it was like an act of like will to restrain myself from saying something that then would have turned the conversation more toxic. It was just an act of willpower. It got easier, actually. It didn't get harder. It got easier by the fact that, at a certain point, we were actually like exchanging views and opinions respectfully, and it did get easier at a certain point, probably like late in the dialogue.
Okay.
Yeah.
Because you knew how to impose your own restraint, and apparently you did too.
Yes, we both did.
That's
yeah.
good to hear.
Yeah. So it does happen.
You should congratulate yourself.
Oh.
And maybe it's not
I don't really want to give myself pats on the back. Yes, Michael?
Thank you. Mike Lippitz from Kol Hadash. Yeah, I think the Facebook stuff is not going to work because people don't even in a group, like we have here, a lot of people don't have the background information. It's a complex history there. We talk about occupation and forget that Gaza and West Bank were occupied by Jordan and Egypt for the first 20 years, right? And, we talk about, colonialism, but less than half the population are of Ashkenazis, and we forget about all the Iranian Jews and Iraqi Jews and Yemenite Jews and so forth who came there and populated the country. And so, it seems very difficult to, maybe talk about, Gaza. Israel got out of Gaza.
Yeah.
How did that turn out? Right? And then you talk about the rightward shift. That's, I think, a big part of the rightward shift in Israel. It's like, okay, we did what we were supposed to do. We left. And what do we end up with? A state that is, in rocket. So I think that's why the social medias work, because I think even just having the basic background history, things are very selective. To have another view of colonialism, you have to pick and choose parts of that history and ignore the other parts.
Yeah, thank you. We both are. I could speak for Natan that learning about something, actively seeking information, is good. I want to speak to that a little. I'll give you a chance in a second, Natan. Actually, I spent a lot of time in the academy, but I also, where I did my army service was I was in the history department of the IDF, and the first question is like, did the IDF has a history department? So it does, and that's where I was in the Army archives, and that's where I learned about Israel, or relearned, and so seeking information and making informed choices. And having informed opinions is very important, and I think we all there's studies on confirmation bias, for example, and it's interesting. More educated people are more susceptible to confirmation bias than less educated people, because we're more adept at seeking out information that we agree with, and so we're just better at like Googling the right sites, or and so it's really hard to escape. It's really hard to escape confirmation bias. Even seeking the act of seeking out information today is, that's what I often on Facebook I would say, well, where are you getting your information from? That's riddled with errors. This is, so it's like, who do you trust? And so that becomes, with idea like, with ideas of fake news that are permeating our dialogue, and very skewed presentations that are rampant. It's really very difficult sometimes, even for very educated people, to is this really saying? Is this really true? Is this an accurate representation of the facts, or is this an opinion that's not wholly fact-based? So I would say, care and restraint are extraordinarily important. Again, if I go back to martial arts, one of the things that they teach us very, very early in martial arts is civility, is politeness. The reason is because we can kill each other with our bare heads, and so it behooves us to be polite to each other, so that we can maintain dialogue without resorting to that, and that is that's important. And so just the act of restraint, the act of, think before you speak, search out information, hear somebody before you respond, like eternal wisdom that you find in ancient literature, just as you find today, is definitely applicable.
Yeah, well, I think we kind of pretty much, I don't know if we have anything else to add to about this specific topic about social media and its effect. Somebody here mentioned an organization called Jews and Arabs Refuse to Be Friends, which is enemies. Oh my God! Talk about. Okay, so I get emails from I get emails. I get it also on Facebook. But what I did notice is that in Israel, they meet face to face. It's not just a Facebook phenomena, and that makes all the difference in the world. So, yeah.
It may sound strange to you, but I met a million people on Facebook. And what I mean is that I wasn't really aware of the American Israeli Jewish community in America. I always knew they existed. And years ago, when I was an emissary of the Jewish Agency to the Federation of Greater Detroit, lived here for 3 years, I got to meet quite a bit of Israeli Americans that live here. I had no idea that today it counts over 1 million people that are Israeli Americans that live here. They have many Facebook groups, and certainly one of the topics of discussion is Israel, but not only, and I'm mentioning that because this is a group that usually do not congregate in congregations. And one of the reasons is that the outreach to them was done in I would say, inefficient ways. And I think that our movement could be relevant to them, and it can be relevant to them as long as we can become more informed about them living here, but more informed about Israel as well. So I think that's another aspect of this conversation.
Ron Schwartz, Deerfield, Illinois, Kohadash, Humanistic Congregation. This is a little bit off point, but to the point of whether Jews and Arabs can be friends, I don't know. But I know Jews and Palestinians can be friends. There's an organization called Hands of Peace, headquartered in Glenview, Illinois, with a satellite program in San Diego. And Palestinians and Israelis are invited every summer to a camp in both suburban Chicago and San Diego. It's a wonderful program. I know people who sit on the board, and I know this was for social media, but I thought I would interject that.
Thank you.
Thank you. So I think we're going to move on to our next subtopic. Anybody who's had questions that they don't feel have been addressed, over here, and they'd like to talk to me or Natan, we're social people. I'm happy to have conversations. I would like to talk about narratives, but we've actually talked a good deal about narratives already. So I would like to talk then a little bit more than about black and white, which was the last of our 4 topics. As I previewed it, there's this phenomenon of left-wing evangelical Christians in the United States, and there were, there are left-wing religious organizations in Israel. Historically speaking, if you want to be students of history, the national religious people were predominantly left-wing before '67, and it was they were on it was over the 6-Day War. It was kind of a turning point. But even today, because my encounter with humanism was gradual. I was part of Meimad. I was part of Nativot Shalom as I was at the beginning in my first years of college, and so. So those are left-wing religious organizations in Israel. Orthodox. They were Orthodox, and those, and they still exist and are still active. You hear about them less and less, which is unfortunate. And so I wanted to talk about a little bit about that, from the perspective, because to go back to narratives a little. So there, as somebody who I studied Bible in Israel, biblical criticism predominantly, and I would say the pool of the place of Israel, because I'm a student of ancient history, the pool of those places that have the same names as I encounter in the Hebrew Bible, whether, lots of the Hebrew Bible is not history, but, myth and legend, but the pool is intense, even for somebody who doesn't believe in God and doesn't experience the supernatural. And, I living in Jerusalem, going to the places that bear the same names as they do in writings 2,500 years ago. There's just like that pool of history I can't describe it. Only it's not just the mind; it's just like a body experience, just a little bit, that the narratives that can arise from that pool are ones that are dynamic ones and ones that need to be addressed. And it's not confined to just religious groups, but to secular groups as well. There's a real reason why Bible is valorized a lot more in secular Israel than it is in the secular Jewish world in the United States, and that is because the people who came to Israel, felt that pool of the place and the name and the names that they found in the Bible and the events, and so I just wanted to, and so that narrative can take you in a number of directions, and it has, for left-wing religiosity, they valorize a system of ethics, I would say, above that pool, and for others, like the pool, the land, it becomes more important. That they valorize that more, and so that's why I don't ever like dividing the country into binaries, because it just, you have so many different permutations of this pool. I feel the pool as well. It's the reason that I stayed in Israel. Natan, let me give you a chance.
Well, I want to go a little bit to what Tzemah started talking about the religious, the Orthodox. We think of the Orthodox as right-wing and secular as left-wing, at least in the Israeli setting. And how many people have ever heard of Professor Yeshayahu Leibovich? Not enough. Okay, really not enough. Okay, and Professor Yeshayahu Leibovich, who was, by the way, was a very Orthodox man, in July 1967 made a statement. He says, "Okay, we have those territories that we gained in this war. Get rid of them right away, as fast as possible, because they will be the end of Israel as we know it." Okay? And he had been active toward that. At the same time, how many people are familiar with a former minister, probably will be shortly, and again, a minister in the Israeli government called Lieberman, okay, who is very much of is originally from the Soviet Union, but very secular Israeli, completely secular, very much in the Israeli right wing. So we need to be careful to make those distinctions the way we usually generalize them.
Yes.
So I want to bring up a topic that actually quite literally talks about black-white. So one thing I've noticed is that the U.S. Black Lives Matter and racial justice organizations, not all of them, but some of them have started aligning with the Palestinian cause and viewing the Palestinians as if they are the brown and black people in this conflict, and Israelis as if they are the white people in this conflict. And what I'm interested to hear your thoughts, what you've seen, because unfortunately I think what is missing here is that it's basically a complete erasure of Israelis of color, who, from my understanding, and I wanted to actually get your thoughts on this also, my understanding is that it's Israelis of color who tend to be more religious and tend to vote more right-wing, particularly when they come from, Iraq, Yemen. So I'd love to get your thoughts on that.
Definitely. So absolutely, the Jews of Eastern descent in Israel, I don't know exactly, but are about half of the Israeli Jews. There's a little less, a little less. Yeah, it used to be half.
They were a majority, a slight majority before the Russian Aliyah.
Yeah, the Russian Aliyah changed the just like in a lot of countries, the Jews of Eastern descent were discriminated against. I, for example, I was thought, before they got a look at me at the yeshiva that I went to, which discriminated on these lines, they wanted to make it seem like there were more Jews of Eastern descent than there were, because my name is a more Eastern name, and so they put me in a room with 4 other Eastern Jews from Iraq, from Tunis, and so just as a, but it's interesting. I want to go back to this intersectionality that you're talking about, because that's like the trendy jargon that's being used, and it's interesting because there are people, the Jews of color, even though they're not they're not half now, but there are a great number of Jews of color in Israel, and to make it seem like the Palestinians are the people of color. There's a reason why there's a constant checking of IDs in Israel. It's because you can't tell if a person is of Palestinian descent or of Israeli descent or of other descent, and it makes that very it's very artificial. So there is, you are right that percentage-wise there is a tendency among more Mizrahi Jews, more Eastern Jews, to be right-wing and to vote for religious, like Shas is a Mizrahi party, but it's definitely not exclusive at all. Again, it's just percentages, right? It's again, and so at least. I have having been in that academy for a very long time, and I'm about to get my second doctorate from University of Toronto. There's a neo-Marxism that's like taken hold of the academy, and so you have to be careful with it. It's become, I've seen it just in the years that I've been in the academy become in some campuses dogmatic. Meaning, like I, as somebody who doesn't accept neo-Marxism, was frightened of voicing my opinion in many forums at University of Toronto because of that. And so, and that's bad dialogue. You can, you could think that you're right, but then, making it more difficult for other people to state their opinion is never good. And so, intersectionality has its, in left-wing dialogue has its deep problems, and it has to, it's just, not all strong, it's making common cause, and common cause is great, and, but when you also create an other, that other is not necessarily another. Like, that's the problem. Like, that identification of Palestinians with people of color is not it excludes other people of color. It's making an artificial distinction, and so it's not based on just good facts. And so when even if you support intersectionality, at least get it right. At least I like that's my and so common cause is, and I really think common cause is great, and intersectionality is very powerful because it serves, it helps galvanize some very important causes, but it has some very big downsides of this nature. It just globalizes things that are not necessarily global. Yes.
Gary Sampson, Coach Shalom, Portland, Oregon. If the differences are so hard to discern, why are they? Have you asked yourself why they are treated so differently?
He was asking if the differences are, I'm assuming the differences between Mizrahi Jews and Palestinians are, they are, once you, once you have the right color ID or it says Jew in your ID, then you're, yeah, it doesn't anymore? No. Okay. So once you have, or have the right name, yeah, if you have the right name, if you're wearing the right clothing, that's how they make. Yeah, that's right. Yeah. You go by you're not allowed. The idea that that there's color blindness is not applicable, and people make those kinds of judgments all the time in Israel. It's a very good ideal to have, but it doesn't really exist. Yes.
I don't have the exact, I was looking for the numbers exactly, but the numbers of people that came from Middle Eastern countries to Israel is much smaller. It's not happening. It was always much smaller. They have a very strong voice, but it's always been much smaller. What's important to understand in Israel is that, I don't know if you could call it intermarriage between Ashkenazi and Sephardi, but it is growing rapidly. And I think most of the people that I know are not married Ashkenazi to Ashkenazi or Sephardi to Sephardi. So that has changed dramatically in Israel. The other thing to understand is that the number of Jews being born in Israel is the largest number from all over the world, and that is to families that are both Ashkenazi and Sephardi. So this whole distortion is not that correct anymore. There is something in Israel which is called traditional. I was talking about the fact that we're all traditional Jews, but there is a stream of Judaism in Israel that is called traditional, probably similar to modern Orthodox, but I think it's more Orthodox light than modern Orthodox. And amongst them, there are many that are now connected to, I would say, center-right, not extreme right, but center-right. And certainly, like all the West, we have a problem with racism. It's not typical of Israel, it's typical of the West.
Oh, we know about racism.
And we're part of that. Yes. And sorry to say, I don't want to be there, but we are.
Yeah, there's something actually that I wanted to ask you, Sivan. I get too much of my information reading the Israeli newspaper, but not from the op-eds and news articles, but from the letters to the editor, which are horrific, you know. And I am not sure to what extent it's trustworthy, because I get an idea. For example, when I lived in Israel, when I was a child growing up in Israel, I lived in an area that was about half and half Ashkenazi Jews. It's called Bitzaron, and anybody who had been in who was from Tel Aviv would know that area. But there was half and half about. There were a lot of new immigrants, both Ashkenazi, both from Poland at that time, and from Arab countries who came recently after 1948, after Israel's War of Independence. And so basically there were a lot of people from both backgrounds. And at the time, the way I grew up, the way I saw it is, it's a disappearing difference, you know. People are going to intermarry. Within a couple of generations, there won't be a difference. I read letters to the editor today and the way people react to each other's reactions, and it's gotten horrendous. It's gotten so much worse. And I don't know to what extent it's real or something similar to what we get from, you know, to the toxicity, as you said, that we get from Facebook or from other social media. So I wonder if...
Because the title of this presentation was Bringing It Back to Our Communities, I'm going to ask each of you to take 1 minute, now that we've discussed this broad range of issues, to maybe give some advice to those of us who are going back to our communities facing this third rail dilemma of how we should discuss various topics of Israel in our communities, possibly without any Israelis present.
Without what?
Israelis present.
Yeah,
okay.
Without any Israelis.
Yeah.
Or Israeli American.
Or Israeli Americans. So I would, so one of the, you know, one of the affirmations that we have on Shabbat, we had it at the Birmingham Temple, we have it at City Congregation as well, is the dignity of Jews goes hand in hand with the dignity of all human beings. And, you know, and so I would just start off a discussion, you know, with that in mind, you know, entitled, you know, come from that place, and that place grants validity to the opinions of others, to the narratives of others that, you know, that might not share our opinions, and even if the other is, you know, Natan and I, you know, as you could tell, we don't agree about everything, but we, you know, we agree about a lot of things, but we don't agree about everything, and yet we had a perfectly civil discussion. You know, this was remarkable. I just want to say, like, we talked almost an hour and a half about Israel. Nobody really raised their voice. Nobody threw eggs. Nobody threw tomatoes. You know,
despite the fact you invited them.
Yeah, I invited people to bring tomatoes, and nobody, and that is remarkable, because I would say that most discussions about Israel in Jewish congregations that last as long as this one lasted have some acrimony to them, and I felt that there was a civility over here of, you know, granting people space to voice what they had to say that I have not really encountered in and I'm just you know, seriously impressed, and you know, it gives me a lot of optimism about talking about it in humanist communities in general, that we can, you know, if we, you know, hold that dear, if we hold the idea that Jews, the dignity of Jews goes hand in hand with the dignity of everyone, then we can get places.
I very much will go along with, I don't have that much to add to what Tzemah said. You know, in our community, in the Birmingham Temple, we have so much difference of opinion about, I mean, we tend to be more left-leaning, but, and We have a friend of mine who's sitting here, and unfortunately he wanted to talk and didn't, David Finkel, who's a member of Jewish Voice for Peace. I think a founding member in this in Detroit, aren't you, or one of them?
Of the Detroit chapter.
Yeah. And we have members who are supporters of the Likud. And you know what? We managed to live together in this community, and it hadn't come to blows. And yes, if we can.
We never will. Yeah.
Well, I don't think that's a danger. So, yes, that's a very good message.
Thank you. Thank you to everybody for being civil and for participating. And will you two be staying here for follow-up questions?
Yeah, if anybody wants to come and talk to us afterwards, please do. I just want to give people the opportunity to like disperse, but you're welcome to come to me and talk.